Trump administration making segregated facilities no longer banned. Let's put it up full mass. MAGA. After recent change by the Trump administration, the federal government no longer explicitly prohibits contractors from having segregated restaurants, waiting rooms, and drinking fountains. I will explain. The segregation clause is one of several identified in a public memo issued by the General Services Administration, GSA, last month, affecting all civil federal agencies. The memo explains that it is making changes prompted by President Trump's executive order on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which repealed an executive order signed by President Lyndon B Johnson in 1965 regarding federal contractors and non-discrimination. The memo also addresses Trump's executive order on gender identity. There's more. The clause in question is the first in the Federal Acquisition Regulation, known as FAR, a huge document used by agencies to write contracts for anyone providing goods or services to the federal government. The clause is titled Prohibition of Segregation Facilities and reads, quote, "The contractor agrees that it does not and will not maintain or provide for its employees any segregated facilities at any of its establishments, and that it does not and will not permit its employees to perform their services at any location under its control where segregated facilities are maintained." Then it defines segregated facilities as work areas, restaurants, drinking fountains, transportation, housing, and more. And it says you cannot segregate based on race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or national origin. Several federal agencies, including the Department of Defense, Commerce, and Homeland Security, have notified staff who oversee federal contracts that they should start instituting these changes. All right, to be clear, all businesses, those that have government contracts and those that do not, still need to follow federal and state laws, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964. They have not successfully repealed that. They're coming after it, which makes segregated facilities illegal. While there are still state and federal laws that outlaw segregation and discrimination that companies need to comply with, legal experts say this change to the contract across the federal government is significant. Now, I'm going to read a quote from a law professor. I'm going to respectfully disagree. So, quote, "It's symbolic, but it's incredibly meaningful in symbolism," says Melissa Murray. Melissa Murray is a constitutional professor at New York University. Quote, "These provisions that required federal contractors to adhere and to comply with federal civil rights laws and to maintain integrated rather than segregated workplaces were all part of the federal government's effort to facilitate the settlement that led to the integration in the 1950s and the 1960s. Quote, "The fact that they are now excluding those provisions from the requirements for federal contractors, I think speaks volume," Murray says. Highly respected professor of law. I do respectfully disagree. Let me tell you why. We're continuing to look at linear approaches to policy and law. For example, if you were adverse to affirmative action and you believe that affirmative action needed to be done away with, and you agreed with the Supreme Court ruling at that time, I wrote an op-ed that explained it is not about affirmative action. It is about the framework of overall diversity, equity, and inclusion. I said that then. I said they are playing chess while we are playing checkers. In checkers, you use power to gain position. In chess, you use position to gain power. So they were utilizing that one element in order to take down the entire diversity, equity, and inclusion dynamic in the United States of America. So they then went after contracts. They went after scholarships. They went after nonprofits that exclusively served a particular demographic because that demographic was underserved. And now they have freedom to go after it all. But so many thought that affirmative action was just going to be the affirmative action. Affirmative action isn't even a policy, it's a general framework. And white women have benefited from affirmative action more so than any other demographic in the United States of America. Those things were not properly contextualized. Now we have the chipping away of a ban, okay, that specifically prohibited a company from having to do business with the federal government and engage in such an action as discrimination. Why is that important? Because taxpayers fund those contracts. I really don't need to go a step further than that. Taxpayers fund the contract. So you're telling me that I can pay for my own oppression? That's exactly what the government was doing and willing to continue to do. What this does is it eliminates a barrier that the government would have to overcome if they argued that just because a place has segregation does not mean that place is disqualified from contracting with the government. They have eliminated one of the barriers now. Don't think they're not going after the rest, all right? Okay, Big Waz, thoughts, man.
Man, and I think what's important for people to kind of get from this, because it's 2025 and not 1964 anymore, they're not gonna do like blacks only water fountains. What they're gonna do is like they're gonna update it in terms of the people who are being demonized nowadays, whether that be migrants, whether that be trans people, whether that be, whoever. They're gonna update it for the people that are currently now demonized within that right-wing ideology and culture. And so that's what I would like people to stay sort of focused on, and don't think that it's gonna come in the same forms of, oh, you guys can't use the swimming pool, black people, in Mississippi or Arkansas. They're gonna update this thing, and I think that's what's definitely catching my eye, because it's like, wait a minute, like they're not gonna go back to saying like, blacks not come here anymore. Like they've gotten a little bit smarter than that, right? Like they know, especially within the discourse, they can't be seen to be doing something straight out of the playbook of Bull Connor, but just trust me, they're going to adjust and do something just as disgusting, quite frankly, and just as discriminatory.
That is correct. And they know there will be a significant reaction, a backlash, if they utilize the playbook from the 60s. So they have evolved in their bigotry and racism. You are spot on. We will bring you updates as they come.